Welcome to What's Poppin' in Sports. Today we are celebrating our 100th episode with ESPN's Mike Reiss. Reiss has been covering the Patriots with ESPN since 2009, and we couldn't be happier to have you here to join us on this special occasion. So, Mike, thank you so much for joining us on the 100th episode of the podcast.
It's awesome to be here, Brandon, Jason. I mean, 100 episodes, that's really incredible to me. And it's just like consistency, and you deserve a tip of the cap. So thanks for having me on this special episode.
We appreciate it as well. I know we've gone back when we started this back in COVID. You were one of our first guests that we had on, and I was just talking with a friend, and it's crazy to think about how far the 6 year journey has gone. I mean, we were talking about the transition from Brady to Cam Newton, and then since then we've gone also the transition from Bill Belichick to Gerard Mayo, and now Mike Vrabel. So. You've had a lot. I know I mentioned you've been with ESPN covering the Patriots since 2009, but even just in these last 6 years, there's been a lot of changes.
Been a lot of changes, and it's been interesting, Brandon, because I would have colleagues who would have like new coach like searches every 3 years. And when Bill Belichick got to like his 20th year, they'd be like, have you ever even covered one of these coaching searches? And so when I had two in 2 years with Gerard Mayo, which wasn't really even a coaching search, and then Mike Vrabel, they were all like, well, you finally got one after all these years, but you still have a lot more to do to catch up to us.
Absolutely, yes. And that's a good way to start today's episode. And we had four back-to-back win seasons, and it was a bit of down years in New England, which is crazy to think about with all the success that has happened in just this century. But New England needed to make that change. They did with Mike Vrabel, and ultimately brought the team to the Super Bowl. It was not the game we all wanted. We can touch a little bit onto that in a minute, but what elements does Mike Vrabel bring to this Patriots team that you've gotten to see over this past year?
Great leadership and culture setting, Brandon. So when he came in, he had a plan, and I was so impressed with just like literally hitting every uh, sort of point of that plan. And I think they made it further than even he thought that they would make it. So I think that's where I would start in terms of what they did last year. Now we sort of look at this year, and I think it's a whole new challenge with some new obstacles for him that quite honestly, like he created himself, with some of the things that he's been managing this off season. So we'll see if they can. It'll be harder to get back to the Super Bowl, but I think they're going to be a better team, which I know we can get into as well.
It's interesting that you say Mike Vrabel thought the Patriots wouldn't go as far as they did and then sort of overachieved. So I'm curious, I guess from a media perspective, was there any sense of a specific moment when it was kind of clear that the Patriots could really, make it to the stage of being an AFC champion? Because it obviously wasn't the expectation going into the season. What sort of moment during the regular season or maybe even during the playoffs did that really become a possibility?
It's a good one, Jason. I'm trying to think back to it. Like he always says, like if you don't have expectations, you can't be disappointed, or some version of that, right? So I think he might disagree with what I said, like when I said maybe he didn't think they would go as far. But I think if we're being honest and we're breaking it down, it's the first year of his program. He came in and looked at a roster that needed a lot of help, right? So, but if I had to pick one moment, it might have been, and I'll tell you what the players said, was that early season game at Buffalo. That's, if I remember, it was a Sunday night game that they went into Orchard Park, New York, and beat them, the five-time defending AFC East champs. I think that's when the players really said, "Well, wait a minute now. If we're beating them, maybe we are for real. And it sort of took off from there. And they benefited from obviously the schedule that they played, which was a little more favorable to them than what it looks like they're going to face this year.
That's a good point you bring up about the schedule. It was a lot of topic this past year with the Patriots making it to the playoffs. And then another thought is, okay, well, once you get to the playoffs, you're playing against playoff teams and whatever. Do you feel like that was a fair not criticism, but more observation of just noting the Patriots took advantage of bad football, playing against a fourth place schedule, and that good teams are going to win good football games.
Mm-hmm. So I do think, Brandon, it's a fair observation. I sort of put it into the category of like two things can be true at the same time. They benefited from playing a schedule that was favorable. At the same time, you still have to go out and win those games. You mentioned at the start of this back-to-back 4-win seasons. The Patriots were the team that others were looking at and saying, we have a favorable schedule because the Patriots are on it. So you know what I'm saying? It's like, so you still have to go win the games. But I think would be a little bit naive to say, facing Jarrett Stidham in Denver is increases your margin for error as an opponent than if Bo Nix was playing. So I think that was a break they got, but they still had to go out and win the game, which credit to them for doing that.
Going out and winning those games, a lot of that probably has to do with quarterback development, especially. I think that's probably the position you sort of have to pinpoint. And I feel like it can't really be too much of a coincidence. Obviously, guys are going to get better from year one to year two. But when you bring in Josh McDaniels, a mind who has done so much for the Patriots in years past, and pair him with a young guy like Drake May, obviously you when you sort of start a franchise, or when you're sort of drafting this franchise quarterback, you want to sort of pair them probably in the same year with a new coordinator and a new head coach. It obviously didn't go well in year one, but now you have to, after 1 year of Drake May really sort of getting thrown into the fire, you pair him with Josh McDaniels. What did he do to sort of, elevate Drake May's game? Because obviously the talent was always there, but what did he do to sort of unlock that?
Such a good coordinator, Jason, and quarterback coach. And I think the results over the years show that. I'll say, what did he do? He gave him a good system that's quarterback friendly. Basically said, like, you can do what quarterbacks in this system have done in the past, and showed him Tom Brady. And so it's a powerful combination. And then spin it forward to this year, like Josh has challenged him even more. We were at practice last week, and they were having Drake hurry up to the line of scrimmage, and they weren't giving him a play call. And so they were basically having him solve the problem in the classroom after, and going over the whole situation. And I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but it's sort of an example of how they're putting more on his plate and trying to make it his offense, that he's the controller of it, and to use his mind as like a weapon, like they did with Tom Brady. And if this takes off, we saw what it did with Tom, and I'm not comparing Drake to Tom, but you got a chance for some pretty explosive results if Drake grows even more in year two.
It's a good segue to what I was just about to ask you, which was what we saw with Drake May and Josh McDaniels in last year, and what you've seen so far this off season. Obviously, limited practices, but what do you expect, or what do you hope to see from that Josh McDaniels Drake May connection? And what do you think? Uh, is there more on Drake's plate this year, and what does that kind of look like?
Definitely. I was thinking about this, Brandon. Who are like some of the biggest winners in the off season for the Patriots? And the more I thought about it, I was like, I think Josh McDaniels might be one of the biggest winners because they brought in a lot more players, and I think his ability to be creative will be enhanced with the amount of personnel groupings and formations and all that stuff, and then you combine it with the second year with Drake, it looked really good, guys. And I'm trying not to like overdo it. June mandatory mini camp without pads, right? It's you can only do so much in that setting. But what I watched was looked like pretty high level offense. And so when I think of that, I'm like, oh man, this is June, whatever the dates were, 9th, 10th, 11th, or 10th, 11th, 12th. And they're doing this already with a full training camp going into preseason and the regular season. I'm like, if everyone stays healthy, this offense has a chance to do some pretty cool things. A lot still has to fall into place. I don't want to overhype it, but just based on my experience, like I would say foundationally, they're in a really good place offensively.
And when you're thinking about the offense, I think obviously you have to, of course, remember AJ Brown is here, a new acquisition, of course, and obviously the offense could look very different. So I'm curious. It's been, like you said, very, minimal. There's been some mini camps, some voluntary, then like the OTAs. But what have you seen so far from AJ Brown, and what can you expect for him to really add to this offense?
But this looks different, is probably what I would say. There's certain players you look at and you're like, oh man, I haven't seen that too often. And I'm not comparing him to Randy Moss, but that's like an example of when he came in 2007. I remember watching Randy run, and I was like, man, I haven't really seen a receiver run like that. Like he's going really fast, and it looks really like easy to him. Even last year with Stefon Diggs, like I watched him and I was like, that guy looks like he's running routes different than the other guys. And so that's what I would say with AJ. And it caught my eye that when he came in, he didn't want to be leading the receivers in the drills. He didn't want to be leading the stretch line. And less than 2 weeks later, he was leading the receivers in drills and he was leading the stretch line. And so I think his presence is already showing up as like a leader that widely respected among those on the team already.
Well, now we talked about the addition of AJ Brown. There's also been the additions of other players like Romeo Doubs in that wide receiver role. We know that Josh and Drake will have a little bit more to their disposal. Patriots open up their 2026 campaign against Seattle, a rematch of the Super Bowl, which a lot of fans have thoughts on. This is the right matchup. I'm in the boat of, I'm not sure it's the best matchup week one because I think it favors defense, but what do you hope to see that the Patriots can be able to use this year that they did not have in that Super Bowl?
So I'll focus on the offensive line, Brandon. I felt like they were overwhelmed in that game in the Super Bowl up front. And if everything works out the way they hope it will, they'll be better up front. Second year for Will Campbell, who would be healthier. Elijah Vera Tucker at left guard, if healthy, is really good. Jared Wilson moving to center. Second year for him. Micah Wenu at right guard. Morgan Moses at right tackle. Caleb Lomu, your first round pick. Swing tackle. Ben Brown, top backup inside. So that's your offensive line, and your ability to run it, they hope and feel like should be better with Reggie Gilliam at fullback, possibly adding to the tight end room with a blocking presence. So just better play up front, more physical, better ability to run the ball. And honestly, here's another thing that just popped into my head, Brandon, that Drake himself said. He watched the Super Bowl. He said he can learn from that because as a young quarterback facing a defense like that for the first time, like seeing it a second time, you'd think that experience benefits him and the team.
I mean, absolutely. I love using the baseball analogy of hitters when they come up for a second or third time against a pitcher, they're a little bit more aware of the pitcher's pitch velocity. So, having a second chance, we'll see. Obviously, we're still a few months out from September, but theoretically, there should be improvements, even if they're small.
I agree. Good analogy there on the second time around. And that's what you hear when it's a little cliche in football, but they say for players the biggest jump is from year 1 to 2, and you could almost extend that to when you see an opponent for the second time.
And for that week one opening game, the Patriots will have a new 53-man roster. Will not be, of course, the same as last year. And looking back at last year, one of the big conversations, kind of circling back to this wide receiver room, was how many receivers can they sort of carry on the active roster that involved getting rid of Kendrick Bourne, Jalen Polk, Javon Baker. And now you added more than you lost this offseason, well, at least guys that probably have a chance of making the team with Brown and Dobbs, and out goes Diggs. So now you might be looking at possibly carrying 7 receivers if you think Efton Chisholm can also make it. So I'm curious, like I know Kayshon Boutte and Demario Douglas might be, I don't know, I've heard some rumors, I'm not sure if they're true about trades, but is it like possible for the Patriots to say carry 7 receivers next season?
It is. And I'm with you, Jason. Like I want to see how the numbers shake out. Like let's sort of do this out loud here, exercise. Let's lock some guys in. Who do we know is definitely going to be there? AJ Brown, Romeo Dobbs, based on the money, right? I would say Mac Hollins. I'm going to lock him. That might be aggressive, but I think there's certain things he can do, especially with losing Julian Hill, the tight end, that they need, him to dig out a safety in the running game like that. So that's 3 locks. And I'm going to lock Kyle Williams in because he's a third-round pick from last year that I think they want to see develop. That might be aggressive, but that's 4 locks. And then I got 3 other guys. Pop, Douglas, that's 5, right? If I have and then Efton, Chisholm would be 6, and Kayshon Boutte 7. The one thing I'd say, talking to you guys right now on June 15th, coming out of mandatory minicamp, like Kayshon Boutte would be on my team. Like I thought he looked really good in the mandatory minicamp the first day, that he practiced. I'm like, he didn't miss a beat. He looks like he can get open, catch the ball. Like I can't lock him in because he hasn't been around. Like it sounds like trade rumors. I would put him on the team. So that would be my 5th. And then Pop Douglas, Efton Chisholm. I like them both. So to me, it's almost like you have one too many. What do you do? What would you guys do? I don't know. I don't know the answer. And I want to write about it because I'm really interested in how that all shakes out.
I mean, it's a huge question mark because you go out and you acquire a couple new wide receivers, the big thing being you need a wide receiver one. And before you had the Brown trade rumors come in, it was you got Romeo Dobbs, and he's not a wide receiver one, so it's okay, who does he kind of bump off the list? And maybe a player like Chisholm who struggled to make a lot of the rosters last season when there was less players in that position. Maybe he's the one that goes off. But I mean, we've got a full training camp and summer, and obviously they do not have to make those decisions until end of July. I think they moved that date up, right, Mike?
Brandon, first of all, that's a really good point on just like they don't have to make the decision right now. One injury, which happens, we see it with the tight end, Julian Hill. Well, let's say they drafted 2 tight ends instead of 1. You might have said, oh man, how are they all going to fit on there? And Julian Hill has a season-ending knee injury, and you would say, oh man, they could have benefited from drafting 2 tight ends. So great observation in terms of, sometimes an injury can clarify the picture for you, and it's like a first-class problem. You almost have too much depth. When was the last time we could say that at receiver for the Patriots? And I just want to say, like, personal opinion, I do like Efton Chisholm as a player, and I think he can grow into a productive player, like in that slot role, like the Danny Amendola that we've seen in the past. Not saying he would have the same production, but I still see him improving quite a bit. And Pop Douglas had said and I thought this was good insight from him. He wants the coaches of Josh McDaniels told him he wants them to react more. Don't just do what's on the paper on the play. Have some savvy and nuance, and I thought that was sort of good insight from him. And he's looked good in the spring. We'll see what it looks like when the pads come on in camp, which is really the real football.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we've still got plenty of time, but obviously, summer is always a good time to make like not predictions, but to do a little bit of an outlook. And Patriots won 13 games last year, benefited from the schedule. Do you have an outlook of wins or losses that you would hope for this Patriots team to make? And if they're in that range, that would feel like a successful season?
Yeah, I think I go back, Brandon, to like what Bill Belichick used to say, like to win 10 games in the league is hard to do. It's an accomplishment, right? And ten in the when it was 16 game schedule used to get you in the playoffs. Usually 10 wins, 10-6, you can almost guarantee you're going to be in the playoffs for the most part. Now with 17 games, maybe that number becomes 10 and a half, 11. And so to me, I fall back on that. Like a lot of variables in an NFL season, and I think 11 would be the number that I would focus on. Like if they can hit 11, that would make them what, 11 and 11. If my math is good, I went to UMass, so my math isn't always the best, but 11-6 would be a 17 game season. And I think to me that would be the number that I would focus on.
In reaching that 11 win sort of threshold or at least goal, probably one of the biggest things that possibly holds that back or going forward. The biggest question at the offseason is what's going on with Christian Gonzalez? Where is that contract at? Obviously, he's supposed to, if he does get this contract, it would reset the cornerback market and be the highest paid corner of all time. And I know he hasn't gone to some of the OTAs, but what stages of that possible extension are we in? And is that sort of possible and could be, a reason why the Patriots can get to the playoffs once again is because he's locked up long term.
Yeah, definitely. So that's one I just, got to stay on top of over the next 5 weeks. I think the dynamics of it are he's up for an extension. Devin Witherspoon of the Seahawks is up for an extension. They're both represented by the same agent. So there's probably a little bit of, I don't want to say back and forth, but a little bit of dynamic there that is important here. And I think whoever gets the next contract, I think it's fair to say they should be the highest paid corner, right? It's Trent McDuffie right now, and I believe it's 31 million a year or right in that range. And so whoever, usually the way it works is the next contract is 31 and a half, and the guarantees are probably, what you need to work out. And then, so I think, Jason, to be honest, I don't know like how close they are. But something's got to happen because I think it's going to be hard for Gonzalez to come back and play on the salary that he's in, that he has right now.
Speaking of players and all that stuff of acquiring, we saw that the Patriots drafted Caleb Lomu in the first round. You mentioned earlier a little bit about being a swing tackle and what you've seen so far from him and what you think his role will end up being this season and how it'll help the Patriots as well.
Yeah, I've been impressed with just his approach, Brandon. So he's lined up at left tackle with the second unit behind Will Campbell. He's been at right tackle and with the first unit when veteran Morgan Moses takes a break, which we're going to see a lot of in training camp, according to Mike Vrabel, because he says, what, 35 years old, Morgan Moses doesn't need to practice every day. So that'll be Caleb Lomu getting some reps, even see him in a guard. So I think that versatility speaks to his athleticism, his intelligence. Seems like he's made a really good impression on the coaches. I think it looks like a good draft pick because right at that, they were down at 31. And I think they saw like, oh man, if we stay at 31, like if we don't go up and get Lomu, we might, I mean, we might not have a guy that we feel great about at 31. And so they were aggressive to go up and get him, gave up, if I remember, a 4th-round pick, which is not insignificant, to move up 3 spots. But I think the whole idea of more protection around Drake May, to me, that should be number one on your list. Like, you get provide that infrastructure around Drake. I think they hit it here on Caleb. But in fairness, we got to see the pads come on, because that's really how you judge offensive linemen. Like, it's early, but he's off to a good start is probably the best way to put it.
Sort of beyond Caleb Lomu, the Patriots made a ton of draft picks as they do every year, but there were a couple of rounds where they had multiple picks in a row, so they're coming in with a pretty, I'd say, hefty rookie class, mainly with the later picks. But what have you seen sort of overall, kind of beyond Lomu? Is there anyone else who could be a real impact player in year one? Obviously, some positions definitely lost some depth in free agency with some departures. So, is there anyone who can come in? Maybe not so Patriots free agency acquisitions, but rather their draft additions that could possibly make an impact year one?
So, well, I was hoping to see more from the 2nd-round pick, Gabe Akis, at outside linebacker, because they need some help there. He hasn't been around, and it's a little bit of a medical issue. I was told he had like a knee cleanout, which is not a major surgery, but something that has kept him out from being on the field. And then combine that with a contractual situation, he hasn't been around. So that's one we got to put on hold until we get to training camp, assuming he's ready, which I think that the hope is that he would be ready for that, assuming they can work that situation out. Then you go to the tight end, Eli Raridan, 3rd-round pick out of Notre Dame. He's going to have a good opportunity because the guy that they had in front of him, Julian Hill, has season-ending knee injury. So now Eli Raridan is right there behind Hunter Henry. So we know he'll be on the team, and how much he'll play and contribute, we'll see. But seems like a really like down-to-earth kid. How about this, Jason? I asked him, did you buy anything with the money from your first contract? And he said, I'm not really a big spender. He goes, I still drive my same car, and I'm going to drive it till the wheels fall off. And it's a 2018 Nissan Altima. And he's 6'6", 260. And I picture like this big, tall tight end, getting down into the Nissan Altima. And it made me laugh. So those are, that's where I'd start. And then we'll see on the rest of them. Karan Prunty, so 5th-round corner who would be like behind Christian Gonzalez, Carlton Davis on the outside. Maybe he can fit in on special teams. And there's a few more down the line, but I think those are the 3 that probably we should highlight.
One more question, I guess, on that free agency aspect. We talked a lot about the wide receivers. Patriots also added Kevin Byard on the defensive side, and then also Draymond Jones. Um, Obviously, the acquisition of Brown and Dobbs and Elijah Vera Tucker are going to highlight those free agency signings. But if you could just touch on a little bit about those other names and how important it is to acquire guys in the free agency.
Yeah, so one thing that stood out to me, Brandon, is Draymond Jones over Kayvon Chason at outside linebacker. Chason had a good year for him last year, but in Draymond Jones, they feel like they have a sturdier edge player. Some of those runs that got outside, like they feel like they should be able to handle those better with Draymond Jones, who's a little bit bigger and maybe plays with a little more power. So that's one thought on free agency. We mentioned Reggie Gilliam, the fullback. Felt like that was telling that they prioritized him as one of their first signings and gave him some good money. The idea of James Devlin type in the offense, want to be better running the football. So that's one that that I would highlight as well. Romeo Dobbs is interesting because there's a part of me that feels like if they, with AJ Brown, and I think you mentioned this, like Dobbs, it's almost like then you have Booty and Kyle Williams. Like almost I'm curious to see how Dobbs fits into this whole thing, and does he cut into Booty's playing time? And if so, is that actually a good thing for the team? So I'm excited to watch that one play out in training camp. And I'm trying to think off the top of my head. And Kevin Byard, leadership. Like this is like a Devin McCourty, Jason McCourty type guy. Been around, has seen it all, and they feel like they've upgraded. Jalen Hawkins had a really good season for him last year at safety, but they feel like Byard is just a little bit of a step up there, and that the opportunity to get him upgrades them at that spot. Led the league in interceptions last year, so we'll see if he can do it again.
Still kind of looking at kind of like the other side of things in free agency, the guys that they lost. You mentioned sort of the reasons why they replaced K'Lavon Chaisson and Jalen Hawkins, finding someone sort of better on the market. I know that there were a few other guys, like Jack Gibbons was the third leading tackler, and now he's gone. Kyrie's Tonga as well. There's a lot of pieces, especially on defense, I would say, more so than the offense, that are gone. So I'm curious, do the Patriots sort of like there were some positions that they maybe didn't replenish. Also, Anthony Jennings, not to mention, gone after 6 seasons. So, do you think the Patriots kind of were able to replenish some of those other defensive positions, and defense is sort of in a good spot even with those sort of free agency losses?
Yeah, I think it's to be determined, Jason. It's a really good point. Jack Gibbons, I thought, played really good football for him last year. Same with Kyrus Tonga. So sometimes in the league, you need young players to sort of cycle through and develop to become the next layer for the team. And so for Jack Gibbons, for example, they did sign KJ Britt, a linebacker from the Dolphins. He would probably be in that role, but they have Chad Muma, who was on the roster last year, was a former third round pick. He could be in there. And then at defensive tackle, Corey Durden developing. Joshua Farmer was a fourth round pick last year out of Florida State. They might be down short one defensive tackle. Leonard Taylor had the block kick there in the playoffs. He's been disruptive in practice, but they might, that space eating nose tackle. We'll see, if they need more help there or if they have the answers on the roster. I think that's sort of a TBD to me on both spots that I want to see in training camp.
We've started to talk a little bit about the 2026 season. Obviously, it's still a few months away. The Patriots, we know, will open in Seattle. Is there any other games that you've kind of circled or highlighted that you think obviously will be a big matchup, or just a team that you're kind of interested in seeing how their offseason kind of unfolds and how they start the season as well?
So Brandon, no joke, I love them all. Like name a game and I'll tell you why I'm like fired up for that game. It's one of my favorite thing about what I do is like each matchup, there's like different challenges to it and how it hits the stress point of a team. But if I had to pick one, I would say like the Packers at home with Tom Brady in the booth for Fox. Maybe that's the weekend that they induct Rob Gronkowski into the Patriots Hall of Fame. There's only so many home games early in the season to do that. Think about the schedule we were talking about. I think 7 of their first 11 are on the road. So that'll be challenging. But that Packers game is one that I just think about, not just the game itself, but special environments, that you never forget. Like when Tampa Bay came back with Brady as the quarterback, that was a game you never forget, and I think that Packers game could be a really in November, early November, if I have it right off the top of my head, could be like a special Gillette Stadium weekend. Brady's back. Packers generally pretty high level team. Get a feel for, at that point we'll know, are the Patriots as good as we thought they were going to be? But that'll be a good test for them at home.
Absolutely. And then one other game that just kind of popped in my head is playing the Lions in Germany and the fan base. If you could just touch quickly on that and what that experience is like, one, playing an international game, but two, just also these NFL markets abroad as well, having a huge influence with the NFL expanding international games.
So I actually think that that one might be a break for the Patriots to get the Lions in Germany. Patriots have a really good fan base in Germany. I wouldn't shock me if that feels like a home game for the Patriots to some degree. Whereas if you go into Ford Field in Detroit, that's a tough environment to go in and win. It's very loud in there. Fans are great. That team is going to be hungry coming back off a season that didn't go as well as they hoped it would. So good game to pick, especially where it is, Brandon, in the season. If I'm not mistaken, that's like right in the middle of the year, maybe week 10, right around there. So I think those games are can be challenging just with the travel and whatnot. Patriots will probably go out a couple days before, so maybe get a day or two of practice here in Foxborough, head out, get acclimated, and then play. That one's in Munich. Last time they were there, it was in Frankfurt, so a little bit of a different environment relative to the stadium. But I think it's going to be pro Patriot and should be a good test for them. But like I said, maybe a break to catch the Lions at a neutral site versus their home field.
Absolutely. And as you talked about, not being in Ford Field, and it's kind of a neutral site game, but it kind of feels like it favors the Patriots in more of like a home game type of field. So it kind of is an interesting aspect of having an away game, but in your home market type of thing.
Definitely agree. And then when I think about other games, so you come out of that, so they'll do that Germany game, then they have a bye, and then they come out and they get at the Chargers again Sunday night. But LA Patriots fans, like, or California, West Coast, I should say, Patriot fans, they show up. So I'm curious to see what that environment's like. And then you come back, you get the Bills at home, and then you got a quick turnaround, if I'm not mistaken, and you have the Vikings on a Thursday night. So talk about like a little pocket of the schedule that really will test you. But if the Patriots are who I think they are, which is one of the better teams in the league, they'll be competitive in all those games.
Awesome. Well, Mike, we can't thank you enough to for your time and also just to join us here on this special edition, the 100th episode, as I mentioned at the start of the podcast. But 2026 season cannot come soon enough. The Patriots get to be in that opening game, and it's a Wednesday night. How do you, just last question, how do you feel about the NFL moving it to a Wednesday night instead of the traditional Thursday?
If I have it off the top of my head, I think it's only the second. Well, it's the first Patriots Wednesday game ever. I think it's the second time they've opened on a Wednesday because they had to do it back in maybe 2012 because the maybe presidential address or inauguration or something like that. Um, I guess I'm less sort of into the day and more into the matchup. And I'm with you, Brandon. Like that's a tough game to lead off your season with. And I know anything can happen in week one. We didn't think the Raiders were going to come in and beat the Patriots in week one last year. So anything's possible. And I know there's some people around the Patriots that really like it because and even the players have said it, it'll sharpen your focus. If you know you're going out to Seattle week one, like they'll be on their P's and Q's, for training camp and whatnot. But that's a tough game, tough opener. Let's see what they got.
Awesome. Well, that will do it for episode 100 of What's Poppin' in Sports. Mike, thank you so much for coming on.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Congratulations on 100.
All right, we'll look forward to our next episode, episode 101. Will probably be out shortly, but for now, for Jason, for Mike, I'm Brandon signing off. What's poppin' in sports?